we just happen to exist,
Yeah.
and that's why we're here. And I was hoping, the one thing that I think I found quick in the book was the parallel between, and I kind of joke about this, about the parallel between more human conveniences and emotional suffering. And I was speaking to someone the other day about like a climate-related topic, and I was saying, like, I bet the graph for the amount of conveniences we have in our life is kind of parallel to the extinction of our species. Like, the more conveniences we get, we're just kind of blowing through everything that we have here. And I'd love to see how you link it to anxiety and things like that. I'd love to hear you maybe tell some of the audience about that.
So that's a central sort of tenet of the book, is that evolution worked. It created us a species, humans, that can survive when they shouldn't have. But they survived under very specific circumstances. Our evolution was under very specific environmental circumstances. That being, the wilderness and being under constant threat for that survival. And being one of the weakest animals in the animal kingdom. Like, those are the conditions under which we evolved. So the advantage we had was basically one thing, which is our brain. And that's what, like, one of the first myths I like to dispel for people that aren't familiar with the area is that your brain isn't special. Like, your brain evolved in the same way that you have a thumb. Like, we don't sit and marvel at our thumbs and think, oh my God, what a gift from God that we have these thumbs. I mean, some people might, but generally, I don't have long conversations. Yeah. But, I mean, in the same way that our thumbs are really, were an evolutionary adaptation to allow us to manipulate our environment in a much more detailed way, our brains evolved to provide different advantages, right? But they evolved under very specific circumstances that no longer exist for many of us. And that's what you're getting at there, I think, about life got easy. We have the conveniences and so on. So, I mean, a question I often ask when I'm working with someone in private practice or in mental health in general is, how often do you feel your survival is threatened in the run of a day? Like, I mean, not that you just feel worried someone cut you off in traffic, but how often do you think it's a life or death situation that you're facing right then and there? Not very often, because society and the various things that happened along the way changed how difficult it is to stay alive. And that was the fundamental rule that shaped evolution for all species for millions and millions of years, is what do we need to do to stay alive? Not to thrive, not to, be content and relaxed and happy, because that's another big piece of the book, is that happiness is not involved in evolution. And we can get into that a bit later. But so in terms of the anxiety question, if you consider that our ancestors, 100,000, 200,000 years ago, at which point this biology was set. So that's another important thing to remember, is that, the way we think and operate and feel and experience our world was the same way, more or less, that our ancestors 100,000 years experienced and felt and looked at the world. But in those times, 100,000 years ago, everything was a threat. So you were constantly forced to be fully present in the now, observing your surroundings, being aware of other predators, being aware of environmental conditions, like if the sky is darkening, knowing that I better find some shelter because, I could get super cold or die, knowing that if I'm starting to get hungry and I don't have a ready source of food, that needs to become the number one priority, that I have to race around finding food. So our ancestors spent, let's say, 95% of their waking hours in this state of being fully present, aware of their surroundings, and engaged in their surroundings to survive. Okay? That other little 5% period for our ancestors was using that brain to imagine what might come up 6 months from now, and what went wrong with the hunt, a couple of weeks ago, where half the tribe got killed when we tried to take down that saber-toothed tiger. So it's in that 5% of the time that our brains really went into overdrive to try and problem solve and come up with solutions to things and really aid with our survival. And I say that because it flipped with the conveniences that you're talking about. That percentage flipped, so that now we spend, and it's generous, but 5% of the time in this survival in the now fully present period, and 95% of the time in this state of living in our heads, and thinking about what could go wrong and worried about stuff that's happened in the past and contemplating all sorts of catastrophe for the future. And that's where the anxiety comes from. In my book, I talk about how it's a well-known fact that in less advanced parts of the world where there's still, either civil war or there's scarcity of resources or there's other sorts of things, anxiety disorders are very rare because those people deal with real-world problems. And they put those problems that they have to look for and put to work solutions around those problems. So it actually completes the cycle of what evolution intended, is to worry about something and do something about it. Worry about something, where am I going to find food? Do something about it. Worry about hearing a predator in the woods nearby, get away, so I've done something about it. It completes this cycle. But nowadays, with comforts and conveniences, we worry about stuff, but there's just nothing to do about it. So we just end up living with it. That's what creates, anxiety is not, this is another important factor that people seem to not be aware of, is that anxiety is fine. Anxiety is good. Like if you're walking down the road and there's a stranger walking behind you and they're kind of keeping pace with you and they're turning every corner with you and there's pretty suspicious what's going on with this stranger, you should be anxious, right? You should be thinking, should I get out of here? Should I?
Right. It's a signal.
It's a signal. Right. But in that case, right, you'd be anxious and there'd be an action, like you would do something about it, right? But for most of the rest of the time, we get worried about things and there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
And that's what becomes the disorder.
Yeah, I really like